Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Villegas, and I'm the Communications Director. I have the right to celebrate National Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We're launching our third season of our interview series with survivors and allies. The goal of this series is to serve as a resource for fellow survivors, offering connections, encouragement, and insight for anybody navigating the journey. The idea for this conversation actually came from Chessy, who we're interviewing today. She shared that when she was younger, she wished that there had been a place where she could hear from other survivors, people who walked the path and could offer hope, perspective, and solidarity. This series grew out of that wish, and through these conversations, we want to highlight voices of survivors and allies who are helping create change, supporting one another, encouraging institutional courage, and building a stronger community. We are so grateful to finish our series for Sexual Assault Awareness Month by interviewing the Prouts, Susan, Alex, and Chessy Prout. I am so happy that we have this time to meet and to record.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'm so happy that you're part of our team and so grateful for everything that you've done at I Have the Right To.
So, as we all know, this year marks the 10-year anniversary since Chessy came to the Today Show to share her story. I wanted to start by asking, when you and your family first began to speak publicly, what did you hope people could hear and understand from your story?
The very beginning in 2016, I wanted to come forward because I was so frustrated with the amount of victim blaming and misinformation that existed online about the very public nature of my case. My perpetrator was given accolades and adjectives that made it seem like he had so much to lose if he was found guilty of what he had done to me. And I was, meanwhile, the nameless, faceless, alleged victim in all of these reports in the news and online. And I wanted to come forward and share my story, put a face, put a human body behind these sort of hate comments that were coming up about my experience when I was 15 years old, and show everyone that this affected my life more than it's going to affect his. This is something that I did not choose. I did not choose to become a survivor of sexual assault, and nobody chooses to become a survivor of sexual assault. But we should have the right to be able to speak out afterwards, to claim our stories in the ways that we want to be able to make sure people know that what was done to us was wrong, that we understand that it's not our fault, and that we know that we deserve to be believed. And so I wanted to share that message, not just for myself, but also for all the other survivors that I had been able to meet, but also that had come up to me and told me that my perpetrator had done the same thing to them. I wanted to stand up to make sure that I did everything in my power to make sure that he never did what he did to me to anybody else. And because of that, I found such a warm and welcoming community of other survivors, advocates, consent educators who were ready to welcome me with open arms and share their experiences, and not just their similarities and understanding of what I went through, but also provide me with hope. Getting to talk with and meet with and get close to Angela Rose gave me so much hope about what could happen in the rest of my life, that I could find peace and strength and vibrancy and happiness and family and joy, something that I didn't think was possible back when I was going through the immediate aftermath.
And I think from a parent's perspective, during the darkest days of going through the criminal trial and the turning on Chessy by her peers, the St. Paul's community, our broader community being sort of so confused in terms of what to think and how to speak to us, Susan and I turned to each other and said, if we get through this ordeal, we're going to dedicate every day of our lives to make sure no other survivor faces the blame, the shame, the isolation, the silencing that Chessy faced, and all of the secondary victimization that Chessy and everyone in our family had to deal with. And that was the first sort of instinct, I think, of everyone in our family. We need to do this work to help educate and raise awareness.
I love, Chessy, how you speak about finding community and family and a place of care, because so far we've interviewed Charlie Pillsbury, we've interviewed Julian Bell, Ray Epstein, and Hilary Simon, and they all spoke about how one of the defining moments within their life has been getting to know you and getting to know Susan and
Mhm.
Alex and getting to know the organization and how it has just been a welcome change to find a place where survivors could have support, survivors could have a place to have their voices be heard. And I'm just very, very proud that I have the right to is giving everybody a space so that they can be their own person and find community. I wanted to ask, obviously, you all went into the Today Show and it was almost like a throwing a stone out and sharing a story, but then the story took on a life on its own. The message grew, and you had "I have the right to" as a hashtag, and we just posted the throwback with the pictures. And I was wondering, what was it like for all of you to watch that message take on a life on its own, a ripple effect, as we like to say?
That was really quite amazing because it was terrifying to, agree to go on the Today Show and be the parent of a survivor and just feel like you were going to expose your family, but most especially Chessy. And of course, her sister Lucy joined. But we are a family of faith, and it was really just kind of like an answered prayer to see this reaction happen and all the people reach back out and feel like they saw themselves in Chessie's experience.
And what was it like for you, Chessy? Because you were incredibly young when you spoke out the first time. How has your understanding of your own advocacy grown then on?
I have to take a second to really put myself back in the headspace that I was in 2016, because 10 years, while it might not feel like a long time sometimes, right now in this moment, it feels like a very, very long time, which I'm very grateful for. When I came forward, I was desperate for people to understand me, and I had spent so long not being able to share my story because of the criminal case. And coming forward was like finally being able to breathe and to share my truth and to do it with the support of my entire family, including my older sister, whose community that school had been for the last 3 years, whose classmates were the ones who victimized me, meant everything that my older sister stood with me, and was there with me that day. In that moment, I wanted people to see the family behind the headline. We see headlines of horrific things every single day. And yet, once we read the headline, sometimes it just leaves our conscience. We forget about it. And yet, that person, that family, that group behind the headline can't just forget about it. And I think it's all of our responsibility as a community, as a country, as a world to support the people around us who are headlines, who have gone through horrific things, and not just find ways to support them, but find ways to learn more about what they're going through so that we can have empathy and understanding. And my favorite books when I was younger were Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, for the and then Madonna's picture book, The English Roses, where you have a group of mean girls and they finally get to see what the girl that they've been bullying at school goes through when she goes home at night. And that changed the way that they treated her and it opened their hearts. And so I always believed that if people could just know how much pain and suffering and hurt that their words had caused our family, that their actions had caused our family, that they might change. And that was the way I thought when I was 17 years old. Of course, now I have a different view on that, but it's also helped us enter communities in a different way, in a way that we can reach them where they're at and help them get to the point where they recognize that it's okay to admit that I did a wrong thing, or I could have supported this person better. And you don't have to double down and say, well, they deserved it, or my reaction was my reaction. And I'm not going to say I should have done something different. But when it comes to supporting survivors in your life, it's never too late to start. And I think that's what I wanted to share by coming forward and let people know that there is so much going on behind the scenes of every single family. And we should all have a little bit more empathy and love and kindness in our hearts for the people in our lives.
I think that that's a wonderful message, and I'm happy that, as you said, now we're doing the work of reaching hundreds of thousands of people who we wouldn't have even thought about reaching out to. I wanted to ask Susan and Alex somewhat of the same question. How has your understanding of advocacy evolved as a family?
That's a great question. I just came from a school of senior girls here in the Washington, D.C. area. And wow, Chess, I wish you could have been there with us because so many of their comments resonate with what you just said about how they appreciated seeing behind the headlines and how that built their capacity for compassion. Believe that, sexual violence was not anything that we knew much about 10 years ago. It really hadn't entered our kind of thought process. Obviously, we had 3 daughters, so we were just starting to think about it with our eldest daughter going to college. But I believe in the power of advocacy. I truly think that this work, in many cases, is life or death. We support so many young people to this date with our time, our treasure, and our talents that I know we are making a difference in people's lives. And I thank all the advocates that came before us, all the survivors that came before us, the young people who made The Hunting Ground, which came out kind of consecutively with Chessy's experience or just before it. What courage it has taken women and male survivors to speak up all these years. And we are gaining important traction right now in this time. We see it in our headlines every day, something about sexual assault. And that's a huge change from 10 years ago. So it's working. And we want this next generation. Maria, you in your role of communications director and reaching 500,000 people with our posts, last week, and our information on Instagram is changing people's lives. So there are so many levels to advocacy. If you can't stand up and be Chessy on the Today Show, no problem. You have a superpower and you can find what your superpower is and create change in the world. So I'm grateful for this experience in many, many ways to show me my life's purpose. And my goal now in this next decade of our work is to create an environment, which I call a safe environment, a sexual assault free environment. And I challenge students to think about all the energy and capacity they might have if they didn't have to worry about sexual violence. Can you imagine all the energy and time, Chess, we as women and certainly men would have if we didn't have to worry about our personal safety in so many different scenarios, whether it be the workplace or your social world or just in your everyday life, walking around this world? I mean, think of how much more we could accomplish. And I think it's doable. I think we can create that world. So I want everyone to help vision with me a sexual assault free world.
Alex, what have you learned as a parent navigating advocacy and centering Chessy's experience and as a man? Because what you have given to the org or aspirational masculinity work has been so life-changing for so many men around us and so many interns. But I wanted to ask you, what have you learned from all of this?
What I have learned is how to be a better human being through this process. Our advocacy journey has been filled with so many different miracles where we've gotten unbelievable support, unbelievable relationships, unbelievable growth. But for me personally, and I think this cuts across to many, many men, I had to go through my own very unique evolution and learning journey because after Chessy's assault, I was quite a quote unquote normal man. I lived in this very confined definition of masculinity, and my reactions were rage and feelings of revenge, and those dominated my persona to such an extent that I needed to develop a mantra with Susan for us to develop our decision-making process on every action that we took to support Chessy through her healing process, to check myself in my own version of masculinity, that wasn't interfering with Chessy's healing process. And once I came to that self-realization, and through a lot of guidance from Susan, Chessy, and all of my colleagues around me and students that we were speaking to. A shout out to Cynthia, who sort of really challenged us to engage with boys. When she made that simple comment, are we talking to young men? I realized I needed to grow and I needed to evolve and I needed to dive into this work. And that was 4 years ago. Now we are speaking to tens of thousands of young men across the country. We are teaching them about how to be the best version of themselves, how not to be dominated by the toxic air that they're breathing through social media, through pornography, through peer pressure, through locker room talk, and how can they rise above that to be the people that we all know that they are deep inside. I know deep inside young men are filled with love, they're filled with compassion, they're filled with caring, they're filled with all of these emotions that our society does not allow them to feel. And I think that is one explanation for why we have this scourge in our society of violence that is perpetrated by men, against women, against everyone. And, for me, this has been such a life-changing event because our org, and I think we're pretty unique in this work now, is taking up the challenge of dealing with young men, as Chessy mentioned, where they are and acknowledging the circumstances in which they exist and giving them a better option that they can aspire to do, to be, to follow. As young men, we do not have many role models that show us the right way to be, the right way to live, because we're inundated with social media, with television, with all of these things telling us to be that alpha man that takes what he wants, right? Because you deserve it. And I feel so blessed to be able to do this now, working with young men, young people around the world and helping them connect to those attributes that exist, deep inside them.
And I think that we have so far done exactly that for all of our male interns. We're showing them the attributes of a modern leader and a better human. And so many of them say that having found I have the right to and having had the chance of being within our community completely changed the way that they approached masculinity. So I feel very, very happy that we're doing the work in that way too.
Interrupt you there for 1 second because you brought up an important word, the word leadership. And what is so wonderful to see, especially with our male interns, male identifying interns, they have taken up the challenge of leadership and going into their communities and speaking up. And speaking up also to diverse communities to make themselves vulnerable and to lead by example. And all of our interns are incredible leaders, but our world is calling out for a different version of leadership now. One that doesn't sit there on a perch and say, you do as I tell you to do, right? It's one that is there knee deep with everyone else, showing them this is the way you can be. This is the way that we can lift others up, but we don't need to push others down to rise up. And we can use our voices together. We don't need to dominate each other. And in my view, this is really fits the ecosystem that we need to build for our society. I've worked in the corporate world for 40 years. We need more leaders across the board, whether they're men or women. We need more leaders that understand the concept of empathetic leadership, that understand the concept of teamwork, compassion, how to work collaboratively with others, but having a level of integrity and courage that others can aspire to be like, to follow. And I feel like that is what we're generating now with our young people, because our org is really an org of young people. It's being led by our young people. They are feeding us ideas. They're feeding us inspiration every day. And I know, Susan, that's something that you've helped inculcate and develop and support.
Absolutely. We have 16, actually no, 19 wonderful interns who started at different stages of their education and have now grown into amazing people that just surprise me every day with their capacity for just change in so many ways. I wanted to go back for a second again to Chessy and ask you, how has your understanding of healing changed as you've been through this journey? And I ask you specifically because I remember the first time that I read your book that I read I Have the Right to, I was so surprised to be able to see, to put myself in your shoes. And I mean it because I come from a completely different country, completely different upbringing. And I was just so surprised to see how similar we were and how many fears and anxieties we shared. And then seeing your bravery throughout what happened and the aftermath, I asked myself, what would I have done? And I'm sure so many survivors ask themselves, how did you begin to heal afterwards, and what have you learned from that?
First of all, being able to say it out loud. And thank you, Maria, for sharing, the similar experiences. And it's always feels not good to know that somebody else felt the same sort of things, but it is quite a universal experience to be a young person anywhere. We have so many big feelings and thoughts, and we deal with a lot of overwhelm and excitement. And these are universal emotions, no matter where you're coming from or what you identify as. And my experience healing began when I started speaking. It began, and when I say speaking, I mean telling people what happened, telling my friends, making sense of it, understanding, and being able to say it out loud. I think that a lot of pain and trauma festers and grows in darkness. And that's what a lot of people depend on, is they depend on people who have been hurt to be silent and to let it destroy them. Thankfully, I had a lot of resources that were given to me before I was assaulted and I was dealing with anxiety and depression as a middle schooler. And then afterwards as well, when the anxiety and depression just, blew up because of the actions of somebody else and dealing with the re-victimization from my community. But being able to speak to a trusted adult, to a counselor, to a therapist was extremely vital in saving my life and my sanity after my assault. So I'd encourage anybody who's dealing with feelings that are too big for them to handle on their own to reach out to somebody, to a group at their local hospital, to a community center, to a counselor online, to a school counselor, to a friend, to a trusted adult, because we shouldn't be forced to carry these big moments on our own. And so much of that pain and anger and bad feelings grows in darkness.
What would you say if you could turn back and talk with the younger Chessy at that moment 10 years ago? What would you say to her?
I would just say keep going and be kind to yourself. You're doing a big thing. And I would just keep on telling myself to be kind to myself. And that it's okay to stop and take a break. I think we all need the reminder to be kind to ourselves.
Every day.
Mhm.
Susan, you were talking about your idea for the future, an education free from sexual assault, and I love hearing you talk about it because you do it with such conviction and it makes it seem so clear in front of us. But I did want to ask, how do you balance your hope with the realism of what we're seeing every day and what we encounter every day, and how long it takes for cultural change to actually take place?
I can't help but be hopeful when I watch what's happening around us. Yes, we've taken some steps back in the public square in the United States in many, many ways, but just watching the reporting happening right now on our Congress people who are being investigated for sexual violence and hearing the new kinds of questions reporters are asked is thrilling to me. That's important. And I know it's because of all the voices that have joined together demanding better, of all the different advocates that go to Capitol Hill, that work on our social media, that work in so many spheres to say, did you know this was happening? Why didn't you speak up when you saw someone abusing a staff member or harassing a staff member or behaving in a way that is not becoming of a leader? And we had a women's caucus back in 2018, right after Chessy published her book, that we intersected with, that were making changes on how congressmen should behave. And it's like 8 years later that we're feeling the effect of it. And it takes time, but I'm not worried about the time it takes. I just think it's going to take us where we need to go. We just can't be prescriptive about it. We have to just let it go and have faith and keep the pressure on. So I'm very hopeful, and I continue to be hopeful, even though there are difficulties in our paths right now.
And, one of the areas that I was least optimistic about in terms of engaging young men, because of the experience that I had at St. Paul's, seeing all these quote unquote fine young men playing a game of conquest to see how many young girls they could slay before graduation. And these young men are all in society right now with jobs of responsibility. Um, and with young men today gives me so much hope, because everywhere we go, Maria, young men are lining up afterwards to speak to us. They're asking what can they do. They're asking to volunteer and intern with us. They want to be activated because they're tired. They are so tired of being told how to behave, how to think, being victimized themselves by society and the structures that we're asked to live under. And they are so voraciously hungry for a new path that they want to digest. And our org, which is led by the spirit of Susan and Chessy, is so positive and forward looking. We do not like looking back and blaming people. Maybe I did in the past, but I've had to learn and grow. But we believe in our young people, and we want to engage our older people to say, how do we all work together to help these young people be the best people they can be? And now it's time for us older people to step up, because the younger people have become energized, but our peer group needs to get their blank in order, right? And start getting off their blanks and turn into action people, because we all understand what needs to happen. And we cannot accept the status quo anymore, because we're seeing how it's destroying lives in our society.
Okay, you just did it. You just made me tear up.
I'm sorry.
Yes. I have 3 daughters, and this was how I became an adult. I believed in my power to do good things in the world. I believe in my 3 daughters' power, and this is the evolution. We have to keep supporting one another to create the world we know we can have here.
And Suze, you are so positive, right? Because what I've learned from you and Chessy is we need to embrace boys and our young men, because the only way to help our daughters is to help everyone and create a better society. And that was a tough learning curve for me, but now it makes so much crystal sense. And that's going to be our work going forward. Our goal is to lift the world for everyone.
And I feel so lucky to be able to hear the both of you talk about this, because, I wasn't in a place, and I I don't know now, but to engage young men. I felt scared of young men and the way that they could be so duplicitous, and, especially going through the discovery from the criminal trial, learning what these boys were saying behind my back has totally seeded any sort of trust that I have in men and boys when I meet them. I know how they can act on the outside and how they can speak in private. And, we see that to this day, the dichotomy between the way that men present in public and the way they act behind closed doors. So I'm so grateful that my parents have this sort of hope and belief in the best in young men and people, a hope and belief that I don't always carry, just from the ways that I've been hurt by people in the past. And that's why it's so important that we're a team, that we have a team of people with so many different experiences and backgrounds at I Have the Right To, who can carry the mantle when some of us might not feel up for it. And the way that I feel so lucky as a survivor that my parents picked up the mantle off of my shoulders, but didn't take it away. They didn't take it away and run and do it without me in my honor, or I like to say, or I don't like to say it, and my parents don't like when I say this, but usually organizations like this only exist when the child has died. And I'm just so grateful that I didn't have to die for you guys to care so much about the pain that this issue causes, not just me, but other young people and people of all ages, as we've learned, people in, their 80s that are still coming to terms with the harm that's been done to them. And thank you for lifting it off of my shoulders, but keeping me along the journey, letting me achieve my dreams and my education and my goals in life while also allowing me to have a voice, or not allowing me, but encouraging my voice in the organization, and for everybody on the team who also, even though I pop in and out because I'm trying to make it in different industries and do what I've always dreamed of doing since I was a kid, I still feel like this is my extended family and our extended family's mission. And to be involved with my whole family is something that's really, really special.
You guys just have, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you give answers like that. I am also going to start crying in an instant, but it can't, because we're almost done with the interview. And I am so excited to ask you this next question. So we guys have had 10 incredible years filled with mission, filled with learning, filled with incredible people. What is your for the next 10 years? And not only for the org, but is your hope for life with the next 10 years?
I like this question a lot better than the looking back 10 years one. This one feels nice because I hope that the world becomes a safer place for people to come forward. I hope that we see more accountability and not just in and find not just the ways of accountability that currently exist, but we find new modes of accountability, because the fact that only 1 to 2% of assaulters see a day in jail is proof enough that that system of accountability is not working. We need to find another one. And I'm so grateful for the work that my older sister, Lucy, is doing with restorative justice and learning about the different ways in which we can come together as a community to hold members of our community accountable. And so I can't wait to see what my sister does in the next 10 years, regardless of this issue or not. But I'm so proud of her, and I just wanted to give her an extra shout out, and my little sister too. My God, she's going to change the world as well.
Oh my gosh, I don't know why this is all making me so teary today, but not normally, right, guys? I don't usually get all teary, but I see the next 10 years as increasing our circle. Maria, we're so grateful to know you and to be the beneficiary of your work on this issue and on so many different areas and levels, from working with our young people to creating our communications. And I just can't wait to see who else we bring into this work with us, because I think that's where the joy comes from. We get to meet incredible people who have amazing superpowers, and let's bring them to the light. Let's keep showing people a better way to treat one another and exist.
And I hope our journey of hope continues to resound and rebound, quoting Clyde Frazier, my favorite announcer in basketball, resounding and rebounding. I hope our org, has given so much hope literally to hundreds of thousands of people in the survivor community. I hope the next 10 years extends our reach to others that need this message, meaning the bystanders, the people who have been sitting on the sidelines watching sexual violence run rampant across our society and impact millions of people across the world. I hope we can create a culture and a society that recognizes and rewards people who care, people who do the hard work to understand, what does aspirational humanity mean? How do I develop the leadership skills for the 22nd century and beyond? How do we create a society where everyone can be the best version of themselves and be the most productive person they choose to be in whatever field or work they want to enter? And I am so hopeful now with our boys and young men. And I'm also targeting how we can activate, men in responsible positions to help in this journey. Because with our power structures today, we cannot succeed without engaging men to sort of care about what's going on right in front of us. But I think that's an easy decision to make, because taking it back to the beginning in terms of storytelling, we have a heck of a story to tell about the possibilities of beauty in this life. This is not a bad story. This is one of beauty and hope. So this is a great way to sort of close up the conversation.
The last question that I wanted to ask the three of you is, what is your I have the right to statement?
You guys go first.
I have the right to support and encourage young men. I also have that responsibility, as well. But I have the right to hope for the best for our young people and to be part of the solution through my actions every day.
Okay, you guys have not heard this from me before, but I was feeling it last night with this fresh-faced group of 80 18-year-olds. I have the right, as a 61-year-old woman, to continue to share what I've learned in this world.
I would say I have the right to be kind to myself, not just the right, but the responsibility to, and to take care of myself and the people around me.
Thank you so, so much. What a wonderful way of ending our Survivors series for Sexual Assault Awareness Month 2026. I hope that everybody that is watching is encouraged to support our work by donating, by getting in contact with us, and so little by little we can continue creating a future and an education free from.
We need your support now. This little engine that could has grown, and we are at an inflection point where we now need your involvement. We need your engagement. We need your love. We need your support in whatever way that you can bring it to the table. But this is a now issue, and this is a very difficult thing for me to say because I'm not good for asking for things. I have the right to speak up on this issue and ask for your support.